A 14-year-old boy was fined for selling lemonade on his own driveway, reported by the HOA secretary, Marlene, who treated him like a criminal. She hid behind bylaws and county codes to crush a child's dream. But his mother found a legal loophole that flipped the rules against her. Just wait until you see how the stand came back stronger, and how justice found its voice in the strum of a guitar. It was the kind of Saturday that made you forget the world was complicated. The sun was out, the breeze was soft, and the sidewalks of Maplewood Estates were alive with kids on bikes and neighbors chatting over fences. In front of one modest brick home at the end of Birch Lane, 14-year-old Tyler Crane was setting up what he'd been planning all week, his first ever lemonade stand. It wasn't much, just a fold-out plastic table borrowed from the garage, a glass pitcher filled with fresh squeezed lemonade, and a cardboard sign scrawled in blue marker that read, 50C, lemonade, help me buy my guitar. There were even a few paper cups lined up like little soldiers, and a metal cash box his mom had loaned him for change. It was innocent, pure, the kind of thing people are supposed to smile at. And people did. One by one, neighbors strolled over, dropped a few coins, and left with more than just a cold drink. They left with the warm feeling that community still meant something. Tyler stood there beaming, a little shy but glowing with pride. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was doing something grown up, something real. Then, everything changed. At exactly 2:37 p.m., the peaceful rhythm of the day was shattered by the sharp clack of sensible heels against pavement. Marlene Whitaker was approaching fast, her HOA badge glinting on a lanyard, a clipboard in hand, her mouth already twisted in a scowl before she even opened it. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her. She was the self-appointed queen of compliance, the kind of woman who measured grass height with a ruler and once threatened to fine a family for having Halloween decorations up on November 1st. But today, her target wasn't a yard gnome or an out-of-place mailbox. Today, it was Tyler. She marched across the street like she was storming a federal building and stopped a foot from his table. Without so much as a hello, she barked, "This is unauthorized commercial activity. Shut it down immediately." Tyler blinked. "Ma'am, it's just lemonade. I'm not even charging tax or—" "I don't care if you're giving it away with hugs," she snapped. "You're selling food products on HOA property without a permit. That's a code violation." Tyler looked over his shoulder, his house, his lawn. "But I'm on my driveway." "Driveway or not, it falls under common visual use," she shot back, quoting something from memory that probably made sense only to her. "You are conducting business, and this HOA does not allow that without proper application and board approval." He stood frozen. It was lemonade, neighborhood lemonade. He was trying to earn money to buy a second-hand guitar, not start a franchise. Marlene wasn't interested in conversation. She pulled out her phone and began snapping photos of his table, the sign, the cash box. "Smile for code enforcement," she muttered with chilling satisfaction. "Enjoy your fine, kid." Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked off, typing furiously into her phone as she disappeared around the corner. Tyler stood alone. His hands trembled just enough to slosh lemonade over the side of the pitcher. That night, he was quiet at dinner. The next morning, his mother Jessica opened the front door and froze. Taped to the screen was an official-looking envelope. She peeled it off, opened it, and scanned the contents. Her face went still. Notice of violation, $200 fine for unlicensed food vending. Attached was a copy of a report, filed directly with the county health department, filed by Marlene Whitaker. And just like that, a boy's lemonade stand became the center of a bureaucratic crackdown, led by a woman who saw no difference between a summer dream and a criminal offense. Jessica Crane was used to stress. She worked the graveyard shift at the county hospital's trauma wing, 12 hours on her feet, juggling codes and comforting families when life veered off course. She'd seen enough real emergencies to know that most things people panic over just aren't worth it. But this wasn't a bad shift or a rude patient. This was her son. She stood in the kitchen in her scrubs, her hand trembling slightly as she reread the letter. $200 fine, filed complaint, health department notified, all over a lemonade stand. The kicker? It wasn't even a warning. No knock, no phone call, no neighborly conversation, just a fine, taped to the door like an eviction notice, and the bureaucratic coldness of someone who never stopped to think there was a real kid on the other side of that clipboard. Jessica's jaw set. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She folded the letter, tucked it in her pocket, and told Tyler she'd be back in a few minutes. The HOA clubhouse sat near the front of the neighborhood, tucked behind manicured hedges and a white vinyl fence Marlene had once measured to the inch. Jessica didn't knock when she entered. The meeting room smelled faintly of stale coffee and dry erase markers. Inside, seated at a long table, were 3 board members and Marlene. Jessica locked eyes with her. Marlene didn't flinch. She folded her hands calmly over a stack of papers, a smug half-smile curling her lips like she'd been waiting for this moment. She slid a printed packet across the table like it was ammunition. Selling beverages without HOA approval and permit violates subsection 12A, page 14, paragraph 3, she announced, tone clipped and rehearsed. Food vending of any kind, temporary or not, must be approved by the compliance officer. That's me. Jessica stayed silent for a beat, then said carefully, My son made $15. He's 14. He was out there with a folding table and a pitcher. You called the county on him? Marlene didn't blink. It's not about the money. It's about the principle. Rules are rules. Jessica leaned forward. No, this is about you wanting to feel powerful, and you're using HOA codes to intimidate children. Marlene raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond. One of the other board members looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Jessica stood. He was trying to save up for a guitar, and instead of walking over and talking to us like neighbors, you slapped a fine on him and sent his name to the health department like he was running a food truck cartel. At that, Marlene gave the slightest shrug and said with cool finality, Maybe next time he'll think before setting up shop. Jessica left without another word. Her hands were clenched so tightly, her knuckles were white. Back home, the atmosphere had shifted. Tyler was no longer excited. He was silent. She found him outside, quietly folding his handwritten sign, the corners damp from dew and slightly bent where the tape had peeled. The pitcher had already been rinsed and placed upside down to dry. He was halfway through collapsing the table when Jessica walked up behind him. He didn't turn to look at her. Sorry, Mom, he said softly. I didn't think it would be a big deal. Jessica stepped forward and rested a hand on his shoulder. He finally looked up. You did nothing wrong, she said, and we're not letting a clipboard bully scare you out of being proud of what you built. He hesitated. But she said the rules. She abused the rules, Jessica interrupted, her voice firm now. And you don't give up on something good just because someone small-minded can't stand to see it succeed. Then she knelt in front of him, eye to eye. We don't back down over lemonade, she said. Not in this family. Tyler stared at her for a moment, and then, just slightly, nodded. In that moment, the lemonade stand stopped being just about lemonade. It became a line in the sand, and Jessica Crane had no intention of letting it get washed away. Jessica Crane wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't a politician. She didn't know much about zoning codes or food service regulations, but she did know one thing. If you wanted to take down a bully who hides behind rules, you'd better learn the rule book yourself, and learn it better. So, while the neighborhood slept, Jessica read. She spent the next 3 nights after her hospital shifts at the kitchen table, flipping through PDF documents, government websites, municipal handbooks, and local business ordinances. The HOA bylaws Marlene had cited were vague and full of contradictions, but Jessica didn't stop there. She called the county health office. She emailed the small business development liaison. She spoke with a food licensing rep during her lunch break, scribbling notes on a takeout napkin while sipping hospital coffee. And on the 3rd night, just after midnight, she found it. Tucked away on page 46 of the County Youth Commerce Initiative Act was a clause, rarely referenced, almost never used. But it was clear. Minors under the age of the 16th of May apply for a Youth Street vendor permit, provided they complete a basic food safety course and demonstrate parental supervision. And the golden detail? Once approved, youth vendors are classified under protected community exemption status, allowing them to operate on residential sidewalks, driveways, and even within HOA jurisdictions without need for HOA consent. Jessica sat back in her chair, eyes wide. The exact weapon Marlene had used, the county, was about to become their ally. The next morning, she sat down with Tyler and explained the plan. They enrolled in the online food safety course together, side by side at the family laptop. Tyler passed with flying colors. He printed out the certificate himself, hands shaking, not from nerves, but from excitement. Jessica submitted the application, paid the small fee, and wrote a brief letter explaining Tyler's project, his goal, and why he'd started selling lemonade in the first place. Then they waited. 2 weeks later, on another golden Saturday, Jessica was folding towels on the porch when she heard a vehicle pull up to the curb. It wasn't a code enforcement officer. It wasn't another HOA board member. It was a White County Services van. Out stepped a friendly-looking man in a blue shirt with a county logo stitched on the chest. He carried a clipboard and a bright yellow envelope under one arm. "Tyler Crane," he called out. Tyler was already at his stand, this time with a new tablecloth and a laminated price list. He blinked, confused. Yeah?" The man smiled and handed him the envelope. "Congratulations, son. Your youth vendor license just came through." Inside was a glossy, laminated street vendor permit with Tyler's name printed at the top. There were also official safety posters, a sticker for his table, and a welcome letter signed by the head of the county's Youth Outreach Division. "I've also been authorized to invite you to join the Sunday Farmers Market downtown," the man added. "We reserve a few booths for youth entrepreneurs. No booth fee for first-timers." Across the street, Marlene had just stepped out onto her porch with a cup of tea. She froze mid-sip. The county van, the badge, the license in Tyler's hand. She stood there, unmoving, as her worst nightmare unfolded, her own enforcement hammer turned against her. Neighbors had started gathering, watching the moment unfold like a scene from a movie. A few clapped. Someone shouted, "Looks official to me!" And Tyler? He just stood there grinning, proudly pinning his new permit to the front of his lemonade stand. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, he looked unshakable. Jessica leaned on the porch railing, arms folded, not smug, not loud, but settled. She had played by the rules, better than Marlene ever had, and now the HOA's self-declared enforcer was watching her authority dissolve like sugar in water. After the county van pulled away and the laminated permit gleamed on the front of his stand, something changed in Maplewood Estates. At first, it was just a few more neighbors stopping by. Some came for the lemonade, sweet, ice-cold, and served with a smile, but most came to support the kid who had stood up, quietly and legally, to an authority figure who had long made the neighborhood feel less like a community and more like a rulebook. Tyler became more than a boy with a lemonade stand. He became a symbol of quiet perseverance, of how standing your ground, especially when you're small, can ripple further than anyone expects. Jessica bought a new folding table with wider legs and sturdier hinges. Someone from 2 streets over donated a patio umbrella to keep the sun off his shoulders. A retired graphic designer down the block offered to make him a real vinyl sign. It read, "Tyler's Stand, proudly licensed by the county," in big bold letters, with a lemon illustration Tyler picked himself. By the end of the month, kids from the neighborhood were taking shifts with him. They wiped down the table, counted change, passed out flyers. Parents began to bring extra lemons, bags of ice, even mason jars and paper straws. And when Jessica added a small mason jar labeled Guitar Fund to the edge of the table, it started to fill, fast. Not because people wanted lemonade, but because they wanted to be part of what that stand had become. Each afternoon, Tyler came home and logged the day's earnings on a notepad. Every page was dated, every line was real, no shortcuts, no handouts, just one picture at a time, one customer at a time. He hit his goal by the end of July. Jessica took him to the music shop in town. He picked out a cherry red Stratocaster knockoff with worn frets and just the right weight in his hands. The sales clerk let him test it on the amp, and the moment Tyler strummed his first clean chord, it felt like everything that happened. The photos, the fine, the anger, the paperwork had led here. Back in the neighborhood, the summer slowly turned to fall. The stand stayed open on weekends. Parents now came by to ask Tyler how their own kids could get vendor permits. The HOA, for once, had nothing to say. And as for Marlene Whitaker, well, her power began to fade not with a bang, but with quiet, growing disapproval. Neighbors didn't forget. When HOA board elections rolled around in September, her name was noticeably missing from the candidate list. She didn't run, or perhaps she knew it was pointless. Word had spread. People knew what she'd done, not just to Tyler, but over the years, to gardeners cited for planting the wrong flowers, to elderly residents fined for decorations, to parents whose toddlers' chalk drawings were labeled graffiti. It all added up. Her fall from grace wasn't dramatic. It was just quiet. Now, when she drives past Tyler's house, he always waves. Not mockingly, not smugly, just a wave, like a gentleman. She never waves back. But she sees the crowd. She sees the sign. She sees the guitar through the window, hanging on the wall above his desk, framed with photos from the summer he stood his ground. And every time she hears that faint hum of music drifting out across the lawn, she knows. That sound? It's not just strings on a fretboard. It's a victory tune, and it plays for everyone who's ever been told you can't, and proved they could anyway.